Chapter 4. Asa Sidney's Story. "Come and sit down, my dear. The celebration has already begun," was old Mr. Sidney's greeting as Nancy re-entered the tower room. "I'm sorry to have been so long," Nancy cried, as she took her seat in the big old rocking chair. "The storm must have damaged the telephone lines. I had a hard time keeping a connection." My, Mr. Sidney said with a shake of his head. "When I was your age, such a thing of talking over wires was unheard of, undreamed of. And now you seemed vexed because the miracle does not always perform perfectly." "Fancy being without a telephone," Nancy cried. "Or without the radio, or automobiles, or airplanes, or electric lights." "Electric lights? Pooh! I prefer candles," Asa snorted. "Lights out of glass bottles? Bah! But come, this is a party, not a debate. Semet has made some excellent fruit punch." "Then I propose a toast to Mr. Sidney, and many happy returns of the day," Nancy cried, lifting her glass high. With shouts of congratulation, the four girls rose to their feet, lifting their glasses to Mr. Sidney, whose beard could not conceal his happy smiles. Then the meal was attacked with gusto, and delicious food it proved to be. The candlelight sparkled on the silver and china, and in the gaiety of the occasion, Bess and George lost their awe of the old man, and even Sadie's timidity seemed to vanish. Nancy related how she and her chums had been caught out in the tempest, and how their car had stalled almost at the door of the inn. "It was the gleam of your candle in the big window there that led us to this delightful place," she said. "I am ready to agree with you, Mr. Sidney, that no electric light bulb could have been as friendly." "An electric light probably would have gone out in an electrical storm," Mr. Sidney laughed. "No, the old ways are often the best, although I admit in my turn that automobiles are many ways superior to horses, and certainly the steamboat is far better than sailing ships. Why, I recall—" The old man's chin drooped as he mused for a moment, a distant look in his dark eyes. "Yes, it took me 7 weeks to make the trip to America," he went on. "Now it is made in less than 5 days. To think of it!" "Then you are not an American?" George ventured. "You speak without an accent." "After 84 years in the United States, I was bound to change my way of speaking," Mr. Sidney laughed. "I always spoke English. I was born in England, in Liverpool-on-Tyne. When I was 9 years old, I was apprenticed to a chandler, a man who makes candles. There were no free schools then, my dears." "Was the work hard?" Nancy asked sympathetically. "For the first year I carried wood and stoked the fires which melted the tallow," Mr. Sidney said. "It was hot work, and the hours were long. Then I was promoted to stirring and skimming the hot grease. I was bound out to work until I was 21, and at the end of which time I was to receive a suit of clothes, 5 shillings in silver, and a certificate to prove I was a journeyman chandler. It is not boasting to say that I learned very quickly, and when I was 15 I made my first invention. I invented a candle that was pierced lengthwise by 4 holes, down which the melted tallow ran instead of spilling over the candlestick. Thus it was saved to be burned when the candle grew shorter. My master made a good profit on that. I received nothing." "How unjust!" the girls cried. "It was, and so I decided to run away. I had only the clothes on my back and no money, but I was determined to go to America," Mr. Sidney explained. "I offered to work my way across, and after many failures, the captain of a sailing vessel agreed to give me passage in exchange for labor as a helper in the galley. I washed dishes, served the table, and peeled potatoes. The old man continued. For days we would lie becalmed. Our drinking water ran low. It was at the end of the 7th week that we sighted the highlands of New Jersey, and 2 days later we dropped anchor at Perth Amboy, which in those days was a city as thriving as New York, and was its rival as a port.
I never even heard of it, Sadie whispered.
Well, I found work soon enough, Asa went on. I made candles in Perth Amboy, for although the wealthy used whale oil lamps, most of the people still lighted their homes with candles back in the 40s. When I had a little money laid aside, I moved to Philadelphia, and from there to Pittsburgh. By the time the Civil War broke out, I had my own shop at Marietta on the Ohio River, and was married and a father. I did not go to war. I had 2 children, and I was not called. Evenings I experimented with improvements on candles. Coal oil was coming into use, and I was beginning to turn my mind toward improving the whale oil lamps to burn the new petroleum. I wish I had never thought of it.
Again the white head bowed, and a tremor ran through the old man's body. The girls remained respectfully silent. I had invented the twisted candle, which brought me fame and fortune. I compounded new waxes and made this candle which burns for 8 hours. The secret is in the twist, which makes the candle the equal of 1 twice as long, if you remember your mathematical axiom that a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. Very well, then a twisted line is the longer. Besides that, the first few inches of the candle are made from very hard wax, which does not give so bright a light. The idea was that at dusk, when the candles are lighted, a strong light is not needed. As it grows darker, the candle burns down to a softer wax, which gives more light. It was bought in vast quantities for shops, offices, public halls, and such. The Sidney candle was exported. I leased the patents. Fortune and fame were both mine, and then... Again sorrow overcame Asa Sidney, and Nancy leaned forward in her chair, praying that he would continue. Hannah's strange warning still rang in her ears. Would she hear something to explain the meaning of that?
Men should be content that they should never let success make them greedy, Asa mused.
Surely a man who is successful owes it to the world to go on further, to use his talents for the general good, Nancy suggested, hoping to get Mr. Sidney to explain himself.
It was pride that urged me on, not a desire to better the world, Asa said gloomily. My 2 sons were manly little fellows, already in school. Then little Lily came to bless our home. She was the brightest of all the children. She always called herself Daddy's partner, and I let her have the run of the workshop. Fool that I was. Vain, arrogant fool! If it were not for my conceit, Lily would have grown into beautiful womanhood, and my family might be around my chair tonight, proudly celebrating the birthday of Asa Sidney. Instead, tragedy and years of loneliness.
The old man's grief was so apparent that Nancy rose from her chair and put her hand on Asa's quivering shoulder. I am sorry if we have revived sorrowful memories, she murmured. Please do not be so sad.
Sad?
I am doomed to be the saddest mortal on earth. Instead of a pleasant home, with grandchildren at my knee, I have lived to see my house divided, feud where there should be affection, envy where there should be love. Asa sat up straight and looked about him. You must pardon me, my dears, for inflicting a half-century of sorrow upon you. This is no way to repay your kindness. Is there any punch left? Let us drink to the new world of electricity. Salute! All drained their glasses of icy fruit punch, Bess looking wistfully at the maraschino cherry which obstinately remained at the bottom of her glass. See, the storm has passed, and the moon is at my window, defying my candle. Asa laughed. Oh, and it is late. We must get started, Nancy cried. Thank you for entertaining us so royally, Mr. Sidney. May I call again sometime? Please come often, Asa answered heartily. You have taken years off my shoulders. I promise you to let no more ancient sorrows cloud your visits. And so, with cordial goodbyes and promises to come again, Nancy and her chums bade farewell to Asa and Sadie. Nancy, obeying an impulse, took Sadie aside and told her again that her father was a lawyer. If he or I can be of service to you, please let me know, she said. I hope to see you again, and often, Sadie answered shyly, even though I cannot imagine myself ever needing legal advice. And now for the stalled motor, Nancy called to her chums as they all started down the stairs. Let me settle the bill with Mr. Semmet, and then I'll see if I can get the engine started. End of Chapter 4.